I'd like to introduce Hok Woo, who probably needs no introduction from me, actually, from McMaster University's Emeritus Prof. He has won all sorts of prizes and medals and is very well lauded, if you like. He's going to talk about, I want to start with trekking the history of Canadian cryo-hydrology.
Thank you very much, Dennis. Good afternoon, everybody. I got no gift to give to you. So so all I can do is to bring you on a trip. Now, with Pat, not geographically, but historically, back into the co-region hydrology of Canada. If I say co-region hydrology, not very attractive, isn't it? Because it's just plain English. So I've got to invent some word to make me sound more knowledgeable in languages. So I call it cryo-hydrology. We all know what that is. It's low temperature hydrology. That's all, right? So, but it sounds much better. Besides, if I'm taking you on a trip on the tourist brochure, it's better to tell you something you don't know what you're getting into. Then you can't blame me and say, you don't read the fine print, right? So what really I mean is that it's got 4 different elements that we deal with: snow, ice, frozen ground, and of course, there's cold water. But the emphasis, of course, is on the word cold. Otherwise, it will be talking about somewhere that you don't find water, like Wadi Rum. You find Lawrence of Arabia instead. So anyway, you know what I'm talking about, right? It's not this country, it's another one, Omar Sharif country. So I want to make the point that Canada is a cold nation because more than half of Canada has got more than half of a year with snow on the ground. Just look outside, you see that. Right? And you think there is some place with warmth. Well, look very, very carefully. There's only a small strip in the west coast that the mean January temperature rises above 0 degrees. So I would say that Canadian hydrology drives the co-region hydrology. Reversing that, then the co-region hydrology actually goes through every aspect of Canadian hydrology, as you have already found out from some of the talks before me, which saved me a lot of time of explaining things. All right, so Howard wants 40 years. I want to bring him back to childhood, which is 50 years, when he was still a student. He admitted that, right? And that was 1967, when Canada was exactly 100 years old. Now, at that time, I tell you what's important. One thing is Howard was a student. Second thing is, at that time, money means something valuable. Those Canadian coins were made of silver. Now, it's just nickel. Doesn't worth a dime. Anyway, so that's the thing. But one important thing for hydrology was in 67, the Canada Centre for Inland Waters was created, and the first director is somebody that a lot of your CCRN people know. He was the, first chairman of the management board. So there's some link over here, and he was prominent leader. Then he's retired. So I use the past tense because he is now happily doing his retirement, like me, after this talk. Now, at that time, hydrology was largely applied. Don Gray said that. And what it really means is that it's playing second fiddle. If you know what second fiddle means, you should listen to what Howard said last night. He said we were just an arm of hydraulics or something, paraphrasing, right? But it's an arm and a leg of agriculture, of forestry, avalanches, and most importantly, hydroelectric power. That drives Canada for quite some time in that 100-year period because we have this big project called Bay James. I'm speaking French. It's James Bay Project, that's what I mean, right? Okay, but that prepares us for a good, promising start because we have all these background, even though we are supporting, but it built up the base. So what did we have at that time? We had all these publications. Notice that only one I show is Canadian. Some of us of the good vintage, I'm talking about wine, but talking about us too, you recognize things like Vintage House famous handbook. And you recognize somewhere in the background, that's hydrology for engineers. If you have not read that, you must be less than 40-year-old. And then even older, you have this US Army Corps of Engineers, Snow Hydrology, which was my Bible. And then you come to principle of handbook on the principles of hydrology as Don Gray stuff. These are very important publications that influence the cryo-hydrology of Canada in its development. Now that's where is Petrinero? Anyway, yeah, he showed us all the advanced things about how you measure stream flow. In those days, that's how you measure water level. Not this guy, this is my fellow student. You pay a farmer or somebody living next to the stream and something like $10 a month, and this person goes take 2 depth measurement at that time. This is actually quite safe. It's called a boom gauge. Instead of measuring downward, it's got a chain, so you drop a weight and touch the water surface, read. Yeah, so I could see my friend over here nodding his head. He knows all these things. He's of that vintage vantage, right? Anyway, so that's what happened in the old days when we were doing hydrology in Canada. Okay, but then comes what I call this sunshine glorious period when we have the splendid sunrise for our trip. Just I recognize, say, 4 phases in the development of cryo-hydrology in Canada. So this is one of the starting phases. So inside that, there are several major breakthroughs, achievements. One major thing was the development of process study. Recall, I said it was applied hydrology, which means, paraphrasing my good friend, who was our Petrinero supervisor, a very good civil engineer, he said, we got the right answer for the wrong reason. Got that? So now we're trying to provide the reason for the right answer to make sure that this is all right. So this development of process study was very important because it allowed us to have better understanding. And what drove it was the field program. So there are lots of field investigators now. And with the field program, this was really supported by a lot of people who are used to going to the field, geoscientists, geographers, and people like that, who like Shackleton. I did not say Scott. He didn't come back. Shackleton, he would go out to all these remote places and so on. So they dare going out, right? Jeff, you heard that? So that was the period of heroism. You missed that. You're too young. And then there is the development of benchmark research basins. And that was driven mainly, I would say, by international forces, like the International Hydrological Decade. So if somebody does that, we have to do that too, Canadians said, right? And so there is this thing I put that on for our this great guy called John Pomeroy. That's Marmot Creek, 1981. It looks quite different now. So those were one of the things that's important. Second thing is development of statistical hydrology and hydrologic models. And I would just say, thank God we got rid of these analog computers. And you have all these models and statistics coming out, including, but there are lots of American ones coming in. I just quoted that, which is the Harvard Water Program. But you've got SAR and other things, and we have a homegrown one, which is the UBC watershed model. Right? So there's a period where it's a development of this computational side of hydrology. And then one thing which is very important is data. And we have a lot of increase, a great increase in hydrologic data gathering. The water survey, as I as we know, has started way back, but then gradually expanded its observation network, and it actually moved from hard copy into digital, so that now even your great-grandchildren can press the button and get streamflow data, right? Now, there is an increase at the same time of climatic station, which is important, going with streamflow data. And at the same time, we have a spatial spread, which was thanks to the satellite information. So this is for the data information development. And one very important thing was the creation of Subcommittee on Hydrology. This was formed under the National Research Council of Canada to stimulate hydrologic growth in Canada. And this was under the Geodesy and Geophysics. It's a subcommittee, but later it elevated to become an associate committee itself. And look at the membership there. It is representative of the broad sector of Canadian hydrologists. It's from people from the federal government, provincial governments, professional societies like Canadian Society of Civil Engineers and so on, and universities, and even private firms like you see Keith Latham, he's a consultant. So it's very broad representation. All good things have to come to some stop. Then came 1990s, and that was, if you are sort of historically minded, that was the economic downturn, and that led to a drop in a lot of public funding and also private enterprises as well. So the government, the National Research Council, was restructured and does not, present tense, support basic science. And all those associate committees were terminated. But thank goodness, the hydrologists were able to find its new home in the Canadian Geophysical Union. And that has got a hydrology section, which is still going very strong. Now, there's more sad stories. A lot of these research basins collapsed. There aren't too many left. And if you want to find out more about the detail, ask John Pomeroy about Marmot Creek. He could give you all these soap stories about it. But anyway, so there are many of these research basins gone. And many of those northern climate stations and hydrometric stations were closed. Well, yeah, where is it? Right in the middle. That's a hydrometric station in the north, in the Canadian high Arctic. Of course, they'll close it. It's too expensive, right? But worse things still got to come. If you are a researcher, not a government person, you got to buy data. You got to buy streamflow data. You got to buy climate data. We just thought, didn't those data come from my tax money? Well, too bad. Right? They don't have money. So they got to find money somewhere. So that was really a bad time. Oh, well, here comes a little bit of cloud broke and so on. There's a bit of light, a bit of shadow. But the light was good. So by year 2000, millennium comes. Everything was getting better. The cryo-hydrology was on firmer footing. I don't really go through that. Everything was on firm footing, okay? And then we got this collaborative project coming. We have these big projects. The government start to put in some emphasis on large projects, like Mackenzie GWEX, like IP3, and of course, like CCRN with our, I said indefinitely, no, I won't use the same word, our great leader. So this comes to fantastic, successful conclusion. So we have these large collaborative projects starting after those passage of bad periods. So things were much better. Economic development in the north helped a lot of the engineering. And so the hydrologic part was improved. And there is also, due to climate change and such issues and environment and so on, so research was increased. Well, not all that great. Federal government science came under scrutiny or came under political pressure. I'm not going to elaborate. That means do or say whatever the government says, you say, right? And then we have zero-sum game, because somewhere along the line, you rob Peter, pay Paul type of thing. You have large collaborative projects. The small projects suffer. And notice that a lot of these northern co-region area, they depend very much on small grants. Okay, last bit, going to the future, very quickly. That's not very important. This is my thought. My thought is not as important as your thoughts. I would think that you should maintain the current strength, like what we had before, and expand into the future the other direction with other disciplines. Now, I don't need to say more, because we have papers telling us how important it is to link up with, say, medical field, like E. coli. I got a bigger picture of E. coli, but it's equally harmful, right? And then you could do it with a cold sea, so like the a dam, river, flowing out to the sea type of thing. So we got to do that. Hydrologic information, there are three things I want to say. One is we have very poor knowledge of stream flow during river breakup, when there's ice in rivers. And in wintertime, you drill through the hole, but you only got so much data. And the rating curve is not that good. Al might not agree with me, but he can comment on that. The second thing is we don't have extensive data on snow water equivalent. Yeah, you got the distribution, you could get the depth, but you don't have the density. So remote sensing have to develop somewhere along the line. I think, well, NASA could help us with that. And finally is permafrost. You could do any groundwater modeling in co-region area. You don't know the three-dimensional distribution of permafrost in the soil. All your models would be just an indication or oversimplification. And when you say that climate warming thaws the permafrost lead to increase in groundwater flow, I ask you how, where, when? And you can't answer that because you don't know where the permafrost is inside the soil. This is the last sad bit, really, really sad bit. This is Canadian Arctic Islands. You know, don't know where that is? That's a small inset map, right? How large is that? It's got about 1.5 million square kilometers, right? There are 4 existing gauging stations, 4 that measure stream flow, right? You know what 1.5 million square kilometers is in Europe? You see that? What we have is you got 1 gauging station for UK, 1 for Spain, 1 for France, and 1 for Germany. Isn't that great for cryo-hydrology of Canada? But that's a sad note. Have a good note. I'm glad that Glenn wrote the song because he introduced for me the famous Canadian hydrologist who was once the president of IASH, Witt Tremisch. Witt wrote, he probably said the same thing too. In 1988, he said, hydrology is regarded mostly as a technological discipline rather than a science. This attitude is responsible for much bad science in hydrology, which in turn has led to much bad technology in applied disciplines. Wasn't it sad? No, it's not that bad. It's improved. So after 50 years, I think we are having not a bad story to tell. That's the end of the trip, Howard and Pat. And thank everybody for your attention.